Alright, so up next we have Shadow League against DPSbrick. As we saw before, DPSbrick is actually, he's been doing very well this tournament. And if I had to guess, I think I would put my money on DPSbrick. Shadow League has point defense and a lot more cannons, but I think he's going to have a much harder time dealing with the three blockers from S&W 35. Meanwhile, all those missiles sort of overwhelm point defense anyway. And when the blockers close range, the point defense ends up shooting at ships instead of missiles. Yeah, I suppose I could do that too. Just leave the ejected ships on the outside. But you can see that the DPSbrick is doing very well on the scoreboard. Although I think he's got one of his ships in a pretty bad spot. It's more or less completely surrounded and caught off by himself. But at the same time, Shadow League is kind of doing the same thing. You can see the ring of tiny missile ships. As they bring down another one of Shadow League. DPSbrick holding on pretty well though. S&W having a very good tournament. Yeah, he's built up quite a commanding lead. So even though there's still quite a bit of time on the clock, if I had to guess, I'd say S&W is probably going to take the match. This is very one-sided. Yeah, all three of the large ships for S&W's fleet are even still alive. And you can see even though Shadow League has a bunch of point defense on the ship on the right here, it's just being overwhelmed. And then the torpedoes are arriving. And torpedoes have been a pretty major player for S&W 35's fleet. They've, I think they more or less single-handedly scored the win against Duke Slayer's fleet. The missiles are the missiles are preventing armor regeneration, but the torpedoes are really the things driving the point home. I think Rudolph here is just going to have a bad day. Yep, there goes some of his thrusters. Yeah, and that's the end of Rudolph. S&W 35 takes round one. And yeah, as convincing as round one is, I'd be very surprised if round two went much different. The fleet from S&W 35 working out very well. Even the shielded distractors have been serving their purpose pretty well. They're easily the fastest ship in his fleet, and from what I've seen, they like to run up, distract the enemy for a little bit, and then they run away. Which you can see on the top is kind of pulling one of the Shadow League ships way out of position. and it's pretty uselessly chasing the ship from SNW 35. And, you know, it's not really contributing to the fight much at all. And I'm quite certain that Icemourn's ship is worth more than SNW 35's, which means that trading the attention of one ship for another is favorable in this case. Although the Shadow League ship did manage to secure the kill, but I think it's far enough away, and it's been gone long enough that it's given more than enough time for DPSbricks to do their job. And you can see there's still 5 more of the ships just like it. And we got Rudolph coming in on the north. See if he's got any presents for these little guys. The little missile ships for the DPSbrick are rather slow moving, at least compared to a lot of the other ships we're seeing. And that typically leaves them vulnerable to projectiles. But I think they've saturated the area so much that Rudolph decided to run away instead of trying to kill everything. And as a result, Rudolph seems to be getting punched in the mouth. Which is probably not how you want your reindeer. Yeah, this round is also very convincingly going SNW 35's. Also very convincingly going SNW 35's way. And never forget the remnants of Rudolph's nose. And with this being the last ship alive for Shadow League, it looks like SNW 35 is going to take this one. And there you have it. So next up we have Jokrates against Icemourn. I'm feeling like Jokrates has a pretty good chance in this one. We haven't seen a whole lot from Jokrates' distractors. They have a pretty a gun with a handful of mods on it, but I don't recall seeing them ever actually shoot anything. Like, if there was a time to shoot, this is it. Like, Rudolph was in the little cubby, but for whatever reason, the ship is just not doing that. However, Jokrates' missile ships are very, very potent and have been carrying him pretty well. As you can see, Rudolph on the south getting cut up. And a very big points lead for Jokrates. I wasn't even paying enough attention to see that, apparently. But you can see the constant pressure from these missile ships is causing all sorts of havoc for the Shadow League. A very, very solid round one for Jokrates. Based on how this is going, I'd imagine he's probably also going to take round two. Oh yeah, I guess you can see Jokrates' blockers firing. It's just not what I was anticipating. It's a very small red projectile. Let's see if I can find it here in a minute. For some reason I was expecting them to be green. But let's see if we can't find one firing here in a moment. No, I think that's too far away. There. You can see the little red projectiles. That's the distractors firing. So the bulk of the work is, in fact, being done by the missile ships. And with the ship's days numbered, there it is, Jokrates takes the match. So up next we have Shadow League against the Herald of Dawn. I imagine this is going to go in favor of Splinter. Look at that. Just didn't even see the projectile, just flash of light, blocks evaporated. It's ridiculous. And with a very strong round one going in favor of Splinter. Moving into round two. I can't imagine this one's going to go that much different. Just waiting for the really bright flash of light. And now let's see what dies. Some ship on the south end. Yeah, the Daybreaker is pretty ridiculous. And it's apparently on the southeast side of the screen now. Or the northeast, or northwest. I don't even know where it is. I'm trying to guess where it is based on where the torpedoes are coming from. It's just not working out. Oh hey. It built a ship. And flung it across the arena. Alright, so up next we have DPSbrick against TNTFF. Not really sure what to make of these two. I think Jokrates might have the advantage overall. It all hinges on how long the shield ships and the waffles managed to distract the missile ships, I think. You can see Jokrates is dealing a ton of damage with 17 ships already dead. Both of these fleets use a fairly similar sort of formula, where they've got a front line of tanks and distractors, and a back line of missile support ships. The main difference being that Jokrates has more distractors, while S&W has, I think, more support fire overall. But if the distractors from S&W 35 go down, then Jokrates missile ships should clean up the support ships from S&W 35 rather quickly. And as Splinter says, a lot of that is due to the fact that the little ships won't be able to avoid all of the missiles that Jokrates is putting out, and so they're largely guaranteed to get hit by them. And small ships getting hit by missiles tend to die very quickly. The scores are pretty close, though, largely as anticipated. Some of the missile ships for Jokrates are finding themselves way out of position, and that does not bode well for them. And we've seen S&W 35's fleet come back from a greater deficit than this. There's still enough time on the clock that this is very much anyone's game. The shielded distractor is working wonders for S&W 35's fleet, though. You can see them on the right side of the screen keeping a couple of the missile ships almost completely permanently busy, which is giving the support fleet for DPSbrick plenty of time to do its damage. And you can see that it's closed most of the score gap already. This is a tough matchup to call. And you can see now the point gap is almost completely closed. Jokrates hasn't actually been scoring many points for a little while now. And S&W takes the lead. That bodes very poorly for Jokrates. An excellent submission from S&W. And as I recall, I believe SNW35 mentioned he was going to share some thoughts on the new Terran Republic on the forums here very shortly after the tournament too. I suspect largely due to, or largely based on balance and mechanics, some of that nature. But you can see he's certainly onto something. And with Jokrates' ships dwindling in number, I think this will actually be the win, assuming SNW35 wins round 2. Jokrates actually looked like he was off to a really solid start in round 1. I don't know if he's going to be able to pull off round 2. But if SNW35 wins this, I think that will put him in the top slot for number of wins, which previously was being held by Duke Slayer. Yeah, I'd be pretty impressed if SNW35 won the tournament here. I don't know that he's actually won one of the NMSS tournaments yet. I can't recall. I know he's participated in a handful, but I don't know that he's actually got a victory under his belt yet. But this is damn sure a contender. And here you can see SNW35 even has an early point lead. It's only a couple hundred points, but as we've seen, his fleet just does not relent. Even when they're down by several thousand points going into the second half of the round, it's been more than a few times where they've come back and ended up winning. You can see the DPSbrick tearing through one of those distractors. That ship is pretty aptly named. Although Jokrates took a point lead now. Not sure what died from SNW35. I suspect it was one of the... Yeah, it looks like it was one of the shield ships in the back. Which... Jokrates' missile ships are more than capable of killing the shield ships. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And the longer those things are tied up in the back, the more time the support fleet from SNW35 has had to do its damage. And you can see they're kind of trading distractors right now. And SNW35's waffles are going to be able to hold on for a while after the shield ships are gone too. And yeah, stream delay is kind of a monster. But don't feel bad. Even without stream delay, I still look like an idiot most of the time. Just part of the territory, you know? But yeah, SNW35 still has several of his shield ships alive running around. Just being bastards. Meanwhile, the missile ships are free to rain havoc on the enemy. And as we saw before, a couple 100-point lead going into the second half of the second half of the round does not mean SNW35 is out of it at all. I was mentioning earlier how swarms have this vulnerability where essentially if they don't kill enough of the enemy very quickly, then they begin to lack the damage to kill the enemy at all. And SW-35 uses a swarm, but he largely gets around it by the swarm all being support fire and having some ships in the front to do damage and keep the enemy busy. It buys him a lot of time and lets him take advantage of what swarms do well, which is they sort of engulf the enemy. The shield distractors are falling though, but Jokrates is running out of distractors too. And we've still got 2 minutes on the clock. There's still more than enough time for this to swing either way. Although those torpedoes from Jokrates' missile ships are cutting through the waffles pretty quickly. So Jokrates might take round 2. And this is looking pretty good for him. As the DPSbrick goes down, those hyperstack modules in the middle, worth a ton of points. But I think Jokrates only has 2 of his distractors left alive, and one of them's taking some pretty heavy fire. Well, and taking pretty heavy fire from the back too, which is probably exactly where he doesn't want to get shot. So I'll take a look at this to find the core real quick. Yeah, you can see this core is about 2/3 of the way back, meaning you only have to do half as much damage from the back as you do from the front. This is a pretty big point gap though. I'm feeling pretty good about Jokrates' odds. The shield ships, I think, ended up getting too much of the attention from the missile ships from Jokrates, and as a result they're getting cut down a bit faster than they did last time, and as a result Jokrates is scoring additional points. Meanwhile, the support fleet from SW-35 has been shooting at distractors this whole time, and trading distractors is fine when it works out well for you, but right now it's not working out. You can see the missile ships starting to get cleaned up by those anti-fighter missiles from Jokrates. So yeah, this round is looking very solidly in Jokrates' favor. You can see the ship count just plummeting for SW-35. It seems it's pretty imperative that Jokrates not be allowed to focus fire if S&W wants to stay in it. And Jokrates is out of distractors entirely, but I think he has enough damage on the field and enough of a point lead that he'll be alright. There's only, what, 8 missile ships left for S&W-35 out of the 40 or so that he the 50 or so that he starts with. So round 2 is in fact going to Jokrates. Very well done. Letting it be known that he is not out of the fight yet. And you can see the lack of mobility on S&W-35's support fleet really coming into play there. The anti-fighter missiles are just doing work. is. Round 2 goes to Jokrates. So next up we have round 3. See how these two manage to settle this debt. You can see a lot of the small ships actually spawned in front of the waffles, which is less than ideal for S&W 35. But he didn't have too many casualties. And it looks like the shield ships are doing their job again. As you can see, missiles trailing off on the bottom right and the top right of the screen. Down goes a missile ship for Jokrates too. That's unfortunate. I think the missile ships, like I said, represent the bulk of his total ship capacity and almost all of his damage output. And so even though he has more missile ships than distractors, losing a missile ship hurts much more than losing a distractor. And you can see on the bottom of the screen, one of the missile ships is actually firing at S&W's support fleet. If they keep that up, that's pretty much ideal for Jokrates. One of the nicer side effects, I suppose, of the DPSbrick, you can see that it killed one of the distractors up toward the top center, but it kind of burrowed through and killed the core because of that laser. And as a result, it left the bulk of the armor intact, and the armor ended up absorbing quite a few torpedo hits. Worked out really well for S&W's DPSbrick. And down goes another one of Jokrates' missile ships. These two just refuse to not have a close fight. The missile ships from Jokrates is doing a pretty good job of keeping him in the game, but they've spread out this time quite a bit, and as a result, they still haven't dealt with the DPSbrick distractors much at all. They've killed a handful of the support craft, but this round is looking pretty promising for SW35. As you can see, yet another one of Jokrates' missile ships goes down. All three of SW35's waffles are still in the field, as well as looks like 6 shield distractors at least. Yeah, as Splinter mentioned, the distractors for Jokrates all ended up pointing their butts toward the laser brick, and as a result, it just kind of burrowed through them real quick, killed the distractor, and moved on. Still over a minute left on the clock, and Jokrates is out of distractors entirely, which means this is probably in the bag. And I think we can pretty confidently say that SW35 is going to take round 3. Now that all the various bad things have finally caught up to the missile ships. And DPS.